can't tell I'm running from my shadow, running from my shadow, but it's still there chasing me down. I'll never.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Jaren, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful start to your new year. I'm not gonna lie, it's been crazy, it's been hectic, life has just been tough. I just got done celebrating my 33rd birthday, and that was probably one of the best things that I just got to enjoy over the last couple weeks, especially since I've been working a lot, and I definitely fell behind on a lot of movies that I have seen, haven't had the time to review, nor the energy, and also trying to keep up with all of my screeners, which I barely dented, especially right before the Golden Globes. And I gotta say, there were just moments where I just wanted to wipe the slate clean and just not talk about any of the movies that I saw towards the tail end of December, but I just couldn't move on, especially with the channel. I still have to talk about my top 10 movies of the year, but before we even get to those kind of videos, I need to talk to you guys about Sonic the Hedgehog 3. In this latest installment, we follow Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails as they reunite against a powerful new adversary, Shadow, a mysterious villain with powers unlike anything they've ever seen before. Now, with their abilities outmatched, Team Sonic must turn to an unlikely alliance. I remember about 6 to 8 years ago when the trailer for that very first movie came out and the entire internet just lost their minds. I mean, the original design that they had for Sonic, making it look a little more human-like, was just so horrendous, and it took a lot of backlash, especially from the fans, that the filmmakers decided to take those opinions, delay the movie, and then they committed to a much more faithful design. I mean, there was even somebody on YouTube that decided to show an example of what they could have done, what anybody could have done had they gotten their hands on the proper technology and would have done the Sonic adaptation for themselves. We got the final product of that first movie and everyone loved it. I mean, you know, it was probably the more memorable films that came out during 2020, considering the fact that the pandemic really shut theaters down and nobody was going, but we didn't think we were going to be here thinking we were going to get some kind of franchise. We didn't think that a video game slash, cartoon television show was going to adapt and really take off. And here we are. And even though the threequel somehow happened to suffer from a lot of delays due to like the writer's strike or the actor's strike, whatever it was, I think it was probably the best thing to happen to this particular installment. Whether they had a script ready to go or were still in the rough stages during the writer's strike and or actor's strike, director Jeff Fowler and the rest of his team were just hard at work on the third installment, and it was no surprise that they really wanted to center focus on our Team Sonic. And to be honest, I really think that's what a lot of the fans were expecting, and we're really hoping that's where we're going to gear towards. Extending the work and magic of the visual effects department, they were able to give Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, voiced by Ben Schwartz, Idris Elba, and Colleen O'Shaughnessy, an equal amount of screen time to shine. And if that wasn't enough, the introduction of a lethally skilled new hedgehog was definitely going to shift the narrative in a much more darker direction. Guys, I'm going to be honest, when it comes to the third movie in a franchise, especially let alone a kid's movie, I have a tendency to not care as much. I have a tendency to really lower my expectations because from what the first trailer has served up to the final product, sometimes the excitement never really delivers to what they promised. Sometimes it just feels like a cash grab. I've enjoyed these movies up to this point, but if you're thinking that I'm going to break down every little detail, every little reference that they took to a line up to the cartoon or the video games, you're probably going to have to ask my girlfriend because she is much more of the Sonic fan than I am. But fortunately enough for me, I didn't think this was just another consistent and solid addition to the franchise, but I think this was the best Sonic movie yet. As I said before, the biggest plus that this movie has going for is that our iconic heroes have the spotlight, while a lot of our human characters get to hang back on the adventure. And while Sonic will always remain the fastest and the star of the show, I really like that we got a little more characterizations out of Knuckles and Tails, in which also we get to see what they're capable of, especially when it comes to who's the brain and who's the brawn when it comes to the missions. The dynamic between the three is very brotherly, and I very much admired how their imperfections are still a bit rough, and yet it really results in a lot of integral, dramatic, and comedic moments. A few examples being the vault break-in, as well as a race between the three hedgehogs and who is the fastest amongst them. And then we have Shadow, who is voiced by none other than Keanu Reeves, bringing a much more broodier and darker edge to this franchise as a conflicted antagonist. And very reminiscent to Mewtwo from the Pokemon universe, our audience gets to really relate to his pain, really understand a lot of his motivations that differ from our heroes. And I think it was really cool that they were able to include his iconic motorbike and firearm, even for a brief moment. Now, although the minor tweaks to the origin worked on me, I do think that the approach in revealing a lot of the past in small doses might soften the impact that it might have for a lot of people who do know Shadow's backstory before actually seeing this movie. And I do feel like this story in particular does reveal a lot of Keanu Reeves's weaknesses as to being a voice actor. And a lot of it really has to do with that kind of stale, kind of wooden line deliveries, especially the one-liner stuff. I mean, it just almost doesn't really fit with the Shadow character. The human characters may have taken a backseat in this narrative, but that doesn't mean they've been forgotten. We get to see the return of James Marsden and Tika Sumpter as Tom and Maddie, who are keeping our Hedgehog boys as one unit, as one big happy family. We also have the return of the likable Lee Madobe. I don't want to say his name wrong any further, but Agent Stone. He has a lot more to do this time around, and I love how they never forget to mention his fondness of goat milk to include in his lattes. And then we also have Kristen Ritter, who is introduced as the gun director Rockwell, and she's a very questionable character because, you know, you really don't know where her loyalties lie, but I really wish we had more time to kind of shed more light on her characterization. Now, I remember when Jim Carrey first announced his retirement in acting shortly after the release of that second movie, and a lot of people were wondering afterwards how this movie was going to move forward into a franchise without the iconic and charismatic Dr. Robotnik played by Carrey. At some point, people were petitioning that Danny DeVito take over the character, but a lot of the contribution in the humor, a lot of the improvised one-liners that Carrey has delivered has made this a home run for the casual viewer. And his return meant the world. It meant everything to a lot of the fans, and whether this is the last time we see him slip back into the role of Robotnik, or this is probably a new age for Jim Carrey to jump back onto projects for the big screen, he slips right back into the role of Robotnik like he never left. Not only are we graced with the presence of one Robotnik, but two with the introduction of Gerald, Ivo's grandfather. Now that's a tall order for Carrey to deliver twice the performances, but unlike Despicable Me 3, I think it works. I think it serves the story very well. I do think that Gerald's presence and agenda does soften Ivo as a villain, although after 3 films you kind of root for Ivo to have somewhat of a compassion, a little bit more of his soft side to show off, and there are some wacky grandson and grandfather moments which will have your auditorium roaring with laughter, and I think it really adds also to the emotional stakes where it's somewhat parallel to the trials between Sonic and Shadow. And for this particular installment, they had a surprisingly copious amount of action that had my entire auditorium cheering with excitement. And if you are familiar with the exhilarating showdowns that would happen in the Dragon Ball series, you are going to be completely floored. Now, if I had one major flaw of this near-perfect blockbuster with the amount of stakes and characters, I do think that the emotional weight didn't have the time and space to fully flourish. For example, kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, there are some heartbreaking and poignant moments in here, but with the way that they edited it, with the way that the script kind of came off, a lot of the emotional stuff is very much undercut by very juvenile comedic relief and or racing to get to the next plot point. Overall, I think this movie delivers on all the charm, the cylinders, and promise that many fans of the IP, family, and friends are looking for in a fun blockbuster. And any future live-action project, I really hope to see Jim Carrey and Keanu Reeves possibly work together again. Now, I haven't had the chance to check out the Knuckles television series on the Paramount Plus platform, and so I cannot tell you if there are any integral information that really bled over into this particular installment. But nonetheless, stick around for those two post-credit scenes because it is no doubt that a fourth installment is on its way. Well, all right, guys, that's all I get to share about that movie. Go ahead and check it out if you want to. If you already have seen it, go ahead and share your thoughts. Sorry, I'm a little bit rusty, but I want to thank you guys again for taking some time out of your day to hear me talk some movies. I'm Jaren. Look forward to more reviews, and I will see you guys at the theater. In the meantime, take care. Happy New Year.